Good evening. Welcome to those who in the boardroom and those who may be watching us virtually. Welcome to the Board of Trustees, Santa Barbara Unified Trustees Board meeting for September 10th, 2024. Do we have any requests to speak for closed item? Hearing none, we will now adjourn to closed session. Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to call us back to regular session of the Santa Barbara Unified Board of Trustees, September 10th, 2024 meeting. Now we will go to language access.
Thank you. We have Spanish interpretation available through Zoom and here in person in the boardroom. And we also have ASL interpretation available through Zoom. Buenas tardes, tenemos interpretación al español disponible aquí en la sala del consejo y también por medio de Zoom, al igual que el lenguaje de señas. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Maldonado, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please rise and face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes, I will now announce action taken in closed session. For closed session, C1, employee discipline dismissal release, the board voted 5-0 to approve the arbitrator's recommendation to dismiss the employee in position of senior gardener 1. Second action, C1, employee discipline dismissal release, the board voted 4-0 with the board member Muniz not present to approve the separation agreement with the food service site manager. That concludes all the action in closed session. And now we'll move to the student board member report. Welcome back, Eric.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be back. I want to start off by saying, with the help of Dr. Maldonado, the Superintendent's Student Advisory Council meetings will be back for the school year. The first meeting will be held on September 18th from 4:30 to 6 p.m. here at the SB Unified School District office. I strongly encourage all students to attend the meeting to share their opinions, ideas, and voices with the district, as well as collaborate with other students across the district to make our schools a better place for all. I encourage you students to attend and share your voices. Again, the first meeting will be on September 18th from 4:30 to 6 p.m. at the SB Unified School District office. Most high schools held or will hold their back to school night, which is a great way for students and which is a great way for parents and families to connect to staff and teachers to better relationships. The College and Career Center have been an amazing help for all students. They've held many colleges and universities at our high schools to answer student questions. They've been offering after-school support with college applications and keeping spirits high by encouraging us to wear college gear on Wednesdays. San Marcos, Dos Pueblos, and Santa Barbara High School are in talks to hold another ASB meeting. In the meeting, we will take time to get to know each other, collaborate, share ideas, and build off one another to improve the students' experience on campus. I was able to be a part of the new student mentorship at Santa Barbara High. It's been a great way for me to build relationships with lower classmen and help them with assignments, projects, organization, and what they can do to better prepare for high school. September 15th will mark the start of Hispanic Heritage Month. This will be a great way for us to promote student representation on our school sites. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Now we'll move to the superintendent's report, please.
Great job, Eric. Good evening, everyone, board members. I did want to start this meeting commemorating something that hits very close to home for all of us here at Santa Barbara Unified. Last week, yet again, there was a deadly gun violence in one of our country's schools. The 2 teachers and 2 students were shot and killed at Apalachee High School in Georgia. This is something we all must agree is unacceptable and needs to stop. Schools must be safe places for our students, both physically and emotionally. At Santa Barbara Unified, we're always reviewing our procedures to ensure our schools and buildings are safe. This year, our employees have been asked to complete workplace violence prevention training for the first time as part of our commitment to safety, along with other safety plans we have in place and measures that we take to prepare, but hopefully never have this happen here. With that being said, we want to make sure that we keep our focus on those impacted by these horrific acts, the families, friends, coworkers, and community of Apalachee High School. Last week in our district office, we held a moment of silence for their community that was brought up as part of the social committee here in the district office. And I asked that all of us do the same here tonight before we begin tonight's meeting. So I'd like to take a few seconds for a moment of silence for our colleagues across the country. Thank you. We'll start the presentation slides. During difficult times like this, many of us would agree that Mr. Rogers would always say, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. And I want to start today by sharing an example of that in one of our employees, which is Ralph Molina. I received an email from Dan Bryant, a retired educator with 37 years of experience at Carpinteria Unified. He shared with me how our San Marcos High School football coach, Ralph Molina, went above and beyond. Mr. Bryant was attending his grandson's youth football game last month. Coach Molina went above and beyond to help Mr. Bryant enter the facility, and when Mr. Bryant had a fall, Coach Molina was there to help him get back on his feet and get him some water. He shared with me how these small acts of kindness really show his great character and care for others. And I wanted to lift this up as a story for how we should all stand up for each other here at Santa Barbara Unified. I'm very grateful to Coach Molina and all the staff who have gone above and beyond for our students, staff, and our community. And there's so many more stories like this that I know that go unsaid, but I wanted to specifically call this one out because it was an important message that I received. So I don't think I told Mr. Molina that I'd be talking about him, but I'm certainly sending him a note of thank you and show him some gratitude. Next on my report, I want to quickly run through some celebrations from our district. I have been visiting schools 3 times a week in the mornings. I've been focusing on visiting math classrooms because, you know, in junior high school, we have a new math adoption, which I'll share a little bit more about later. In elementary, I'm looking at 6th grade across each elementary school. And I yet to visit math in high schools, but that's another one of my goals for this year, is to stay focused on a content area of group of teachers, go through the schools, get to know them, and then go on to a new content area for the secondary. But I did want to recognize some celebrations. Santa Barbara Junior High teacher Ed Gover is being inducted into the Santa Barbara Athletic Roundtable Hall of Fame for his coaching of Santa Barbara City College women's volleyball teams. He is a PE teacher at Santa Barbara Junior High School. Monroe honored 65 students with a popcorn party for completing a summer reading program. Students were given a book to encourage them to keep reading as well. The La Cumbre and SPCA library had a makeover this summer, creating an environment that's a more welcoming and inviting place for students to learn, read, and study. You may have heard our very own principal, Casey Kilgore. I chuckle a little bit because I couldn't believe she did this. But we love Miss Kilgore. She camped out on the roof at Franklin to celebrate the school's growing test scores. Dos Pueblos parents and families came together last week to meet school leaders and learn about all the great programs offered at the school for El Dia de los Padres. McKinley co-hosted a great bilingual community concert and community resource fair with more than 150 people in attendance. Trustee Banning and Trustee Munoz were also in attendance, and I did get asked to dance bachata, which is something I'm not very good at. And I realize I do not like to dance in public, but if I have to, we'll do it. But it was a great, fun concert. So we have a lot of great things happening in our schools, and we're really, really proud of all that they're doing. And this is just, again, a really small insight into all the things that are going on. In the next slides, I want to talk a little bit about the work that Ed Services is doing in focusing on professional learning communities. And this is such an important piece of work that we engage in because we know that we invest, when I say we, I mean teachers and leaders invest time in professional learning communities to do the work of looking at curriculum, instruction, and assessments. And these are some of the core values that were developed by Ed Services staff around what professional learning communities are about. I won't read them to you, but you can read them here. Particularly the teamwork approach that teachers are taking to share in the work and to focus on all students. Today, junior high school principals participated in professional learning across the district to align their content area teaching and assessments. Tomorrow, we will have elementary teachers also working on PLC, so we can go to the next slide. Here you'll see the expectations of what we will have all PLCs across the district work on and do as part of this commitment to looking at meeting regularly as a team, looking at essential standards, creating unit plans or grade level plans. This one says unit plans because it's for secondary, but in elementary, it's grade level planning, administering assessments to inform what the students are learning, using those results to inform instruction and next steps. And in elementary, they're going to start doing SMART goals. In junior high, different content areas will be doing these things, but additionally, we know that, for example, today in the don't go to the next one yet. In the junior high school, the junior high school math teachers are really needing to focus their energy on a brand new curriculum. So we were really lofty in our adoption of curriculum and assessments and platforms, but we realized by listening to them today, this is hot off the press from Dr. Wilson, I don't see her here, that there's still some things that need to be looked at, that we're probably a little overachieving in our efforts, and we want to listen to the teachers' feedback around that. So they're going to take it a little bit slower in terms of the platform that will be used, because it was too much to try to get teachers to do in one cycle. In the next slide, you'll see that the SMART goal center, the SMART goal is something that we've been using a lot when we talk about what is it that we want students to learn specifically? How are we going to measure? Are these realistic goals? Again, when we think about, what goals we're setting, are they relevant and are they time bound by when? A very part of the work that Ed Services has done around pacing plans and around common assessment, and you've received those plans from me in board notes. On Thursday, principals will be meeting with us to review LCAP goals, SPSA goals, preliminary CAS data, and also developing SMART goals. So principals will also be using a similar template. All of these activities and much, much more are expected to lead us to an alignment of contributions. So when we think about the theory of aligned contributions, how do we align the contributions of all members of our district so that we can implement PLCs district-wide in a way that makes sense for what students need? And again, this work is in the beginning stages, and as we engage more with teachers, get their feedback, with principals, get their feedback, and school leadership teams get their feedback, we will continue to refine our practices so that, again, we achieve alignment on what students need and how do we know, and then what do we do about it once we figure that out. The next slide, you received also a copy of the survey that went out to staff about departments. This survey will be going out once again in the spring to compare how we're doing, how our services can be improved. And our goal is to create an environment where every member of our district feels valued, seen, and heard. I announced at our kickoff meeting that we would be doing these surveys. If you recall, last year we did the Panorama survey, and that was really focused on what's happening at schools, between school staff and leaders, between, parents gave feedback, students gave feedback. And we heard from our district department staff here that we never have done one on department staff. And that's the reason we added this survey about departments, knowing that we already have the Panorama survey, which goes out twice a year, that's focused on what's happening in school. So the way that we planned it out is that department survey is going out now. Once that department survey is done, in about a couple of weeks, we will do the school Panorama surveys, and the similar pattern will be followed in March. And we expect to turn around. The great thing about Panorama is that we're able to get results pretty much quickly. Within a day or two, we expect to then turn around those results to everyone. We will be asking departments and schools to identify 1 to 2 areas that they want to improve on so that then they can measure it the next time the survey comes around. And we will continue to do that as part of really just getting feedback for how we're all doing, how we can all continue to improve our relationships, our transparency, the trust, the confidence, and find ways to all do the work together and continue to align our efforts. Next, as Eric reported, we will be celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month in Santa Barbara Unified. September 15th to October 15th. It celebrates the histories, cultures, and contributions of American citizens who are ancestors from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, Central and South America. And this month really celebrates the significant contributions by Latinx people who've made contributions in fields such as education, government, science, law, medicine, entertainment, literature, sports, and the military. In Santa Barbara Unified, Latinx students represent over 60% of the district's population, enriching the educational experience of all students and staff. And as we make every student feel heard and seen, and we uplift all cultures, this is what I consider to be vital work of our district. We look forward to continue to uplift the Latinx culture over the next month, and including bringing forward a resolution at our next board meeting. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Maldonado, for that very extensive report. We next go to move to public comment.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We have some public commenters for items that are not on today's agenda. We have one virtual speaker. Do we have that person online? We're going to start with Jennifer Goat. And you'll get 3 minutes. Miss Goat, if you can unmute, we're just waiting for you. Okay. Do we want to come back to, we'll put that at the end. Okay. For our in-person public speakers, good evening. We have 3 of them. And as usual, we have the clock over the door on the right-hand side. There's also a lighting system. It will change to yellow when you have 30 seconds. And first up, we have Kate Lambert, followed by Joel Block, followed by Josby Galindo. Welcome.
Green lights on, we're ready to go.
All right.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having time for us today. I really wanted to bring up an issue that's been happening across our district with paraeducators. I was with a paraeducator when they found out that their iPad was being confiscated. The shock, the confusion, the trying to hold on to it for one more second to say, wait a minute, what am I supposed to do? No communication was given to them. What happened was their iPads were locked and marked as missing. So I happened to be working on the PD days, getting our classrooms ready, when also our printers were all knocked offline, which was an update issue. But there have been issues that there are no communication ahead of time about, and there can be. That makes it hard for paraeducators to feel valued, aligned across our district, included. Now, since then, some paraeducators have received back their iPads for good reasons. Paraeducators use their iPads all the time, whether it's simply handing it off to a student whose iPad is not charged and ready when they need to go to a class and be involved in their general education, whether it's communicating with parents, communicating back to the main teacher, okay? Recording data. Oh my goodness, so much of our job in special education is about data. How can we ever show the growth if we can't record the data? If we're asked to tell our paraeducators to write it on a piece of paper, hand it back to me, and then I will input all the data for you, you're adding more and more steps to people who are professionals and want to do the work themselves. This is their role that they have taken on. I won't even mention that we very much underpay paraeducators, and we have a lot that are missing out right now. I think starting a better relationship with them by giving them back their tools that were very important, useful, and keep people from being on their personal devices, something we are often away about at our schools. Even as teachers, we try to stay off and away as much as we can for role models. If you ask the paraeducators to pay for their own cell phone device to record on, to communicate on, to do training on, You're asking them to pay to work. That is not going to be okay for our paraeducators. It's not going to people are not going to want to come work at SB Unified as paraeducators. And like I said, we are missing quite a few of them. This is one of the steps that can be taken. I also think better communication and showing the value to our educators, paraeducators, counselors, everyone is very important. Oh, we're going to go there. Perfect.
Thank you. Next up, Joel Block, followed by Josby Galindo.
Good evening.
Welcome.
I come before you tonight to share my beliefs as to what must be done to create a positive working relationship between the district, the board, the teachers, and the community. I believe that there are systemic and endemic problems with the way the district approaches its work and a number of activities that ultimately cause mistrust. I wanted to give just two examples. As many of you know, I teach independent studies at the campus on La Colina, and the Quetzal program is also lodged there. Between those two programs, we have 6 certificated educators and 1 paraeducator, each of whom are on site every school day. There are other support staff, such as psychologists, etc., but none of them are on campus 5 days a week. A week ago Monday, we were informed that our paraeducator was being involuntarily transferred. Nobody at our school, including our administrators, were consulted about this prior to the notice. It was simply a decision made at the district office. No information was given as to how this person would be replaced, and we are informed that our paraeducator was needed at one of the larger high schools. Quetzal and independent studies are small population programs, it's true, but it became clear, or at least seemed to be, that the change was based simply on numbers crunching. While it may be true that the move is financially defensible, it goes against every statement by the district claiming that it wants to serve our most valuable students. The fact that no one from our schools or in the community or the people affected were consulted in any way about this move shows the lie that our students come first. It is this sort of consistent way of making decisions from the district that reinforces the teachers and the community's distrust of anything the district states. While this decision was ultimately rescinded and probably was based on a mistake, it could only have been originally made if the makers understood their jobs to first focus on the financial views of the district and not the students' welfare. Second, I believe there's a significant issue with the way the district creates and presents the annual budget. It seems to be the policy to significantly underestimate revenues and overestimate expenditures. While this might be in general good fiduciary policy, and I believe it is, when it's used during contract negotiations to claim that the district cannot afford what the teachers request, it is at best disingenuous and at worst unethical. This past year, while the state requires a 3% reserve, the district policy is a 10% reserve, and the budget, though, ended up being increased, or the revenue increased by about $4.5 million for unrestricted and $7 million for total, giving about an 18% reserve.
Thank you.
This is why we need to change these problems. Otherwise, distrust will still exist.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Block.
you.
Next up, we have Josby Galindo, followed by Rich Lashua. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, school board members, superintendent, cabinet. Thank you for listening tonight. I appreciate your time. First, I just want to thank all those people that are making an effort to work with educators and SBTA. Particularly this week, we worked with Denise Alvarado, who was trying to really help us with some contractual issues that happened, and we worked through them together in partnership. That was great. I'm really looking forward to working with Lynn Sheffield. We had a meeting as well where we're going to try to actually have teachers' voices heard and have that be the driving force what's going to happen instructionally. So I'm looking forward to see that happen and come to fruition. Nevertheless, it is apparent that there's a lot of healing that needs to still happen between the two parties. I attended a management meeting where I was told that SBTA had bad leadership. That made it very clear that both parties have a lot of work to do regarding rebuilding trust and building a collaborative partnership. We have to do a lot of work on that front, and I'm willing to be there and be part of that. We do thank you for sending a survey. I heard that the superintendent's report, and yes, thank you so much for sending that survey so that we can give feedback on departments that are housed here at the DO. It's a good start because our educators definitely want their voice heard. There would be one thing. I did have some people contact me and say, hey, is this anonymous? If that could be made abundantly clear that it is or it's not anonymous, it would be great. I think you guys were just collecting what site they're from, but I think some people have a little bit of concern on that. And of course, I came here during the summer and definitely I'm still going to resonate the same message from before, that we would love to be able to also give feedback on individuals, not just departments, especially people in leadership. Today, I had the opportunity to speak to Superintendent Maldonado and Dr. Edison today, and the topic was safety at school sites. Thank you for that conversation. In the role that I serve, I'm seeing that more teachers are taking more and more mental health days so that they could be okay. But it's not only that, they're also taking leave to deal with mental health issues. So from that conversation today, I like for our district leadership to make safety at our school sites a priority, whether educators are feeling that their physical safety is at risk or their mental health they feel that that's at risk. All of this would help us have a healthy workforce, and it would help us retain our teachers. I don't want them to leave. Some people have left because of what they've experienced. That's what happened last year. We definitely need to have a whole and healthy person in the classroom who serves our students on a daily basis. So let us work together to create the best district possible, and let's give students and educators every reason possible to want to continue in our school system. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Rich Lashua, who I would like to say congratulations for being SB Performing Arts Teacher of the Year. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's wow. I didn't expect it then, and I'm still kind of trying to get over it now. Maybe get over it isn't the right term. Yeah. Okay. You can hear me okay? Okay. Good evening, and thank you for your patient listening ears. One of my favorite parts of the Santa Barbara Junior High year is 6th grade visit day. We bring hundreds of kids from feeder schools to our site, show off some of our best, and visit a few classrooms to learn about junior high life. There's one question that pops up every year. When's recess? In my early years, I'd mentally pat them on the head and tell them they'd get used to it and probably have so much fun they wouldn't even notice. At the time, it was sincere and I thought I was encouraging them. But now as a parent in this district, I have a better understanding of students' perspectives. By 6th grade, we're burning out a lot of kids. My son was complaining about having to take another STAR test in 2nd grade. If you don't know him, God blessed me with a child that doesn't complain nearly as much as I do. So when he does, we listen. If my own kid, the child of 2 teachers, consistently near the top of his class, comes from a modest home with 2 parents who love him like crazy and value education, if he's showing signs of burnout before he's 10, what about students who didn't win that social lottery? The homeless, kids struggling with IEPs or learning English, kids from broken homes, or kids whose parents hated school for not meeting their own needs as children, and they're passing along a generational distrust of the system. What encouragement does our district give them? The district has rightly acknowledged that social emotional learning, or SEL, is a critical component that must increase in our classrooms. However, the district doesn't seem to recognize the connection between vibrant arts programs and SEL. When children express themselves through visual arts, music, theater, dance, or choir, a completely different and better kind of learning occurs. In 2006, a temporary budget cut eliminated the 7th period from our junior high schools. This forced all electives to compete for one spot and programs died. Meanwhile, we've increased the number of required classes, and now the only year-long electives for 7th graders take place outside the school day. And if you happen to be someone who needs help with English or other supports, you're not only denied an elective like your classmates, but you're required to show up for an extra 0 or 7th period class. This negative elective system punishes the students we claim to want to help the most, about a third of my site's population. Our district's graduation rate has been steadily dropping since 2019. Suspension rate has been slowly creeping up 0.4 to 0.8% each year. Chronic absenteeism rose consistently. Not only is it bad for these kids, but frankly, when they're here, they're usually disrupting the other kids who are trying to stay invested and learn something. Please curtail the intra-district transfers and reinstate the 7th period day to allow our students the chance to take better ownership of their own education. This is not something the board can solve independently, but if you take leadership to show it's a priority worth pursuing, you'll find the union isn't so hard to win over.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations again.
Thank
Next up, we have our virtual public commenter. And she's no longer online. So that concludes general public comment.
Can I just respond? We will send a clarification. The Panorama survey is anonymous.
Okay, that moves us next to D9, board comments and or correspondent board members like to speak or address the comments. Don't have any requests. Mr. Banning.
I just want to take a minute to comment on the Sing, Dance, and Play presentation that Dr. Maldonado mentioned at the new Plaza Del Mar band shell. It was really a remarkable day. Families from 3 different school districts gathering together, not ours, from McKinley, from El Camino, and another dual immersion program. And I'm sorry, I don't know the name of the school in Carpinteria. But we saw parents, district employees whose children are in the school, and it was just a really joyous occasion. And I just can't say how wonderful it was to see that, and to say thank you to the city as well for reopening and rehabilitating that wonderful band shell too.
Ms. Munoz.
Yes, yeah, a wonderful event to be there, and to see the kids bring up their, parents, the person that was with them, their grandparents and whatnot, and just seeing all the kids get into it. The presenters were wonderful about getting the crowd involved. And one little girl had a guitar, electric guitar, that she was so excited with, and felt like it was her day. So it was just great to be there too, and join the others. I'd also like to introduce an idea that I've had with having, we've gone to schools to read with the students, and I'd like to introduce having authors visit our elementary schools to share their experiences with our students, and to foster our youth and inspire them to also be their own creators of their own either poems, stories, or songs, especially in the elementary schools. I have had the pleasure of speaking with authors that write in English and Spanish, write about their own youth, their own families and such. And I'd really like to see that. I see that as a very much an opportunity to have authors of talk about like diverse topics, whether it be about the earth, their own neighborhoods, their own culture, and so forth. And I find that to be, I know myself personally, very inspiring, and I'd like to see that happen. So I'll be, speaking more about that. And that's my report for tonight.
Yes.
I see that Denise is in the audience, so we'll definitely work with you on the idea we shared last meeting with the board about the April events we will be having around literacy, which includes the connection to the unit that they're studying at that time. So we'll definitely loop this into all of our literacy events for that month for elementary. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I know, as a, when I was a young person myself, in terms of going to the bookmobile and getting books out and then seeing how they actually came about, I think, I'd really like to see that happen. And I think it's very exciting, to share. And thank you for, looking forward to what we can do collaborating in the future.
Thank you. Hearing no additional comments from the board, I will now move to item E1, acceptance of donations for September 10th, 2024. May I have a motion for approval or with gratitude?
I move to approve the donations for September 10th, 2024.
I second that motion.
Thank you. Been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, so next we'll move to our consent agenda item. Board members, just a little management on that, the agenda item. I'm going to request that item F2 be pulled to vote on it separately because we do have some conflicts of interest, so I'll come back to that. Are there any additional items that need to be pulled before we approve? Okay, so may I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda items 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 8?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
Been moved in second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Now we'll move back to consent item F2, approval of purchase order report for September 10th, 2024. And we're going to move to item 2. There, particularly on the report, item number 7, we need to take a separate vote because there is a conflict of interest where you're going to have to, Ms. Sabille, you're going to have to abstain from that report, from that vote.
Yes, I'll abstain from item 7. I also would like to have more information on items 1 and 2. I need clarification on these fairly significant expenses, and so I do not.
Okay, are you wanting that we can pull those right now and discuss them? So that's what you're asking to do. Okay, so which items are that?
That would be items 1, 2, and then I'll abstain from voting on item 7.
Okay, so why don't we take item 1 and his business services here? Is that, yes, someone from business services? Okay. Okay, Ms. Bill, you can ask your question.
So my first question is on item 1, that would be business services. And the clarification that I'm trying to seek with these larger expenses is this is basically listed as a vehicle for student transportation. And I have a greater question. I don't actually have an issue with vehicles being used for student transportation. But I would like to maybe have a greater understanding of how we're using our vehicles in our system. And because they need maintenance, they are a significant cost. And are they being used, are vehicles being shared? Like maybe the partial answer I received that this is used for dual enrollment. I'm thinking it's not just used for dual enrollment. So I'm seeking more information on our whole vehicle program, who's using them, how they're using them. Are we able to be conservative with our vehicles so they're being used by different departments? Is that allowed? So that we aren't just creating more maintenance expense with these vehicles that also aren't going to last forever.
We're going to tag team this one. So We do have vehicles across the district that are being used for various reasons, all for transporting students. Each of the high schools have vans that are being used for athletics. We have vans that are being used for career tech education, CTE tech education that cannot be like if we purchase it for that program, it cannot be shared. So we have some that cannot be shared, and we have others that can be, but it's very difficult to use, athletic vans at the same time that you're trying to take students to go do college visits or go do other education, instructional type educational services. If they're at the same time, they can't use the same vans. So this one in particular is being used at Dos Pueblos High School. And the principal there, Mr. Woodard, asked if he could purchase this van in order specifically to do just educational, instructional type trips and not have to use the athletic vans because they have been sharing in that situation.
So maybe the answer I received when I asked a few questions was incomplete. So for example, if this is being used for instructional type of things, would the mock trial students be able to use it? Would AVID be able to use it? Would PEAC be able to use it? It just sounds like there's athletics and then there's instructional. So if there are many groups that can use this van, and then I don't have an issue with it. I had just received a very limited answer. It's being used for dual enrollment. And I'm thinking of empty vans sitting all over campus, not being used by everybody that could be using them. Also, this van will be housed at Dos Pueblos High School, correct? And so is it also school specific? Like, can other schools borrow vans if they need it?
Yes, in fact, this van, even though it will be housed at Dos Pueblos, is now would be a district van. So we would be able to use it for other reasons, other purposes, other schools if we needed to. There are other, like the CTE vans are very specific and you cannot share. It's for that particular program. But this kind of thing, yes, we definitely could.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. That helps me. And I no longer feel that needs to be pulled from the agenda, that particular item 1.
Was there another question, number 2, that the same party can answer?
Well, okay, so item number 2, the FOSS kits, the safety kits. So I did request and receive a list of what these kits are. And the FOSS kits, the safety kits, the backpacks. Is this, am I looking at the wrong item?
FOSS is for science,
Oh,
and that's
no,
for,
no, no.
for
maybe-
our elementary schools.
The safety backpacks. I'm sorry. So I have to change that. It's actually item 8, not item 2.
Okay.
So
We'll go
if
to
we record that, it's item 8 that I have the question about. So my question about the safety backpacks, again, a very significant expense for the district. And I asked for 2 questions. One is, are we replacing backpacks that are already in the classrooms? Are these mandatory? And then I asked for a list of the items that are in the backpack. Once again, my goal is that we are spending money from grants that has the greatest impact. And so I did receive a list of the items, and it was a little interesting to me because there was maybe a first aid kit, and then there were maybe supplies as if students were going to be locked into a room for like 6 to 8 hours. And I thought, well, I don't know if this backpack actually satisfies my criteria for students being locked in a room for 8 hours. So I first aid kit, if this said first aid kits in every classroom, I would have been, okay, we need first aid kits. Emergency care needs to happen. But I don't know about the expense of this versus just a regular first aid kit. And if we are going to spend money on student safety, I know that Dr. Maldonado, we expressed in a moment of silence during this meeting about a shooting that happened in a school. I would love to spend our money on safety items like a silent alarm that could get the sheriff there in 30 seconds, which they had in Georgia. So my objection to this is I want our safety items to be meaningful, not to just be there. They have to be usable. The survival items in this backpack bother me because they aren't enough for survival. And what survival scenario are we planning for? And if we have safety funds, I would like us to use them in a way that actually will give us a sense of safety, parents, community in the classroom.
Yeah, so there's many different safety scenarios. There's also fires. There's an opportunity that if we lose electricity on campus and kids are having to evacuate and are on the field, the Go backpacks that you're referring to, sites use some sites use their site funds to purchase. So we're not equitable across our school district and everyone having a Go backpack. A Go backpack is if they have to evacuate the building. Sites also have shelters on campuses or storage bins with water and foods and buckets. That's a different source of response to an emergency that we also have. And those things also expire. But this is if we have to kids have to evacuate the classroom and end out on the field, someone gets injured, they have access to that information in there. You need a whistle, you need electricity or lights because you lost power in the building. That's what these backpacks are for. So I understand the concern about a school shooting, which yes, with current events is on the front foot of everyone's mind. But in our safety plans, we plan for school shootings, we plan for outage, we plan for plumbing issues, we plan for fires, earthquakes, everything. So these Go backpacks are for teachers to have in every classroom with all of their information that's printed out the roster for the school year, and they can grab that and walk out and have those, including a first aid kit in it.
Okay, so this is specifically an evacuation backpack. This isn't like, this is your first aid supplies in the classroom in case somebody gets hurt.
No, it's a
Just-
Go backpack.
Okay,
Grab it and go. Yes.
I appreciate that explanation. Now I understand what they're for because I didn't before.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
okay, I appreciate that and I withdraw my objection to that.
Okay, thank you. I would just add, so just on this conversation, I appreciate the explanations where we can connect it. So for instance, we'll just use the Go Pack, as you just said, with regard to, there are many safety aspects that we do. If maybe in the back, maybe in the background, we can say this also is a part of our overall safety so that we're making that connection. And so that if we could do that, it's much to the same we did with regards to the van, where are we connecting in our broader practices and policies? We can do that. Okay, so you're good on those? Okay, great. All right, so let me do some management here, just so we got, and I know, and I also want to let know that there is a public comment that got mismarked, and as soon as we finish this item, we'll go back to that public comment time. Okay, so what I also need to do, so on 2, we need to have a separate vote for item number 7, so that Ms. Bill can abstain from that. So may I have a motion on item number 7 on the purchase order?
I'll move to approve item number 7 on the purchase order. It is instructional supplies for the Visual Arts and Design Academy at Santa Barbara High School.
Second.
Okay, been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
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 Aye. And now I want to go back and capture the rest of the consent agenda to also now include these items that Ms. Beal just just had further clarification on, and that again is on item 2, items 1 and 2, and also consent items 9 through 25. So we are voting on items 2, 1, and 2, and then also 9 through 25. I need a motion for that.
I move to approve the consent agenda with the exception of the item that was removed in
On 7.
that I abstained from.
Yeah, I got you.
Second.
Okay, item in motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right, we navigated that through. Yes, please.
I just want to make sure that the ladies captured. Did she say earlier, Madam President, 1 through 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8, but I don't think you mentioned 7, which is the approval of memorandum of understanding between Creative Network was
Is-
missed, so can we also do that one? That's how I've been following the notes. Is that correct?
So 7 is the VADA on this report, but is that different on the agenda?
Yeah. So that's 7 on the F2 number, but you missed 7 on the list of items.
Because on the report on the backup, it's saying it's 7, but 7, it's item 2. Got it.
So do you think
All
you
right,
still have
so we'll
seven?
now do, thank you for that clarification. Now we will take approval on number 7. I was thinking 7 and 7. F7, may I have a motion for approval on F7?
I'll move to approve item F7.
Okay, may I have a second?
I second the motion.
Okay, been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Did we get everybody and everywhere? Okay, all right, perfect. Now we'll move to the public comment back.
Yes. Apologies for my mistake. This is Jory Zusmer, and you can correct me, please. I promise to get it right next time. Welcome.
Zusmer, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, good evening, members of the school board. I am Jory Zusmer, the Vice President of the Washington Elementary School PTO. I am here this evening to, with some of my fellow parents, to passionately advocate for the funding of Washington Elementary's STEM program. Our school stands at a critical juncture where equitable access to quality education is more essential than ever. First, it's important to address the equity concerns within our district. 2 schools have consistently received support for 4 specials programs, a practice we at Washington have not seen. The provision of the STEM program for Washington students has been made possible solely due to the efforts of the PTO's rigorous student fundraising initiatives and outreach for community donations. This disparity in funding is not just a matter of numbers. It reflects a fundamental imbalance in the resources provided to our students. Secondly, we are aware that of the new funding opportunities available across the district. However, Washington has been excluded due to a perceived lack of need. This perception is outdated. The demographics of our school have shifted significantly in recent years, and with this change, our need for additional funding is more present than ever. According to our school accountability report card, 46.6% of our population at Washington is considered socioeconomically disadvantaged. I must highlight that our PTO and our school site budget are diminished this year, leaving us without the means to independently fund our STEM program. A majority of our annual fundraising money is put into STEM. Last year, we contributed $99,000 and are projected to be well into the 6 figures this coming year. Without your backing, our invaluable program faces elimination. Lastly, this lack of equitable funding directly impacts our students' future opportunities. The STEM program at Washington is a crucial stepping stone into the highly coveted DP Engineering Academy. Without our STEM program, our students are at a disadvantage. They're missing out on essential pathways that could set them up for future success. In closing, I urge the board to address these inequities by providing the necessary funding for Washington Elementary's STEM program that we can no longer provide. Investing in this program is not just an investment in our children's education, but a step towards a more equitable and prosperous future for our community students. Thank you for your time and consideration in this matter.
Thank you.
That concludes our, okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. So next we'll move to our action agenda, and I have a little bit of agenda management on that as well. Action number G, action agenda number 3, we're going to hear now before we hear number 1. So that is acceptance of public disclosure of 2024-26 collective bargaining agreement for the California School Employees Association, CSEA, per AB 1200. Ms. Hernandez.
Mouthful.
Okay. Go. Okay, good evening, board trustees. The last time we did an AB 1200, it was in July, and it was for the negotiations in regards to the SBTA negotiations and the unrepresented group. And so this is the final AB 1200. It's for the SEA, which is the California School Employees Association group. So as a reminder, what an AB 1200 is, it's the government code that requires public inspection of any settlement costs before they're voted on. It is just a regular part of the collective bargaining process that is required. The county must review the AB 1200, which they have done, and to make sure that the district can afford the costs. And so our county has in fact reviewed it. Before I go to it, so what it is, it's going to be specifically regarding the CSEA, but it does include all of the settlement costs in it. So when you see the numbers, it's going to include everything that we have negotiated to date. So just looking at the CSEA tentative agreements, this shows you what the total costs are. It was a really very diligent process of going through the negotiations with CSEA, and it was a very thoughtful process, and it was we looked at every single article just about and went through all of them. So here is showing you what the total costs are. For 24-25, it is 6.8. Thank you. My glasses don't quite work. 6.8, and then for 25-26, it's 2.3 for a total of $9,152,223. So included then in the AB 1200, you will see those costs, and you'll also see the impact across the multiple years going forward. So we do have some concerns from the county ed office. Our budget was stretched to pay for all of the settlements, as we know, and we will need to have some significant cuts in the upcoming years. We did end the 23-24 unaudited actuals a little bit better off than where we had been projecting, which is good. So that the current estimate is for 25-26 and 26-27, $10 million in cuts for 25-26 and $8 million in 26-27. When we did the AB 1200 in July, those numbers were more like 12 and 12. So we're better off just because we're ending the year better off, but that doesn't mean that we don't still have to really buckle down and make some cuts. Oh, and that is it.
Any requests to speak on this item? Okay. Thank you for the presentation. Board members, comments or questions? Thank you for that presentation, and know that's a procedural thing that we have to do. But I do have a question if you can go back to not the last slide, but the next to the last slide where it speaks to the concerns.
I don't know if I can. Oh,
Oh,
thank you.
you can do that. You have the power to do that. So with regards to what we're saying here, the significant cuts will need to be made in the upcoming years. At what point are we going to start to discuss those? Where it's going to have to do? I mean, we need to start having those discussions. We have comments this morning, earlier to this evening that talks about when it happens and not at the last minute. So we want to make sure that we're being mindful and hearing that. Now that we've said this, at what point do we start to make sure that we're working on that, communicating that out, and what steps are going to take to make sure we're getting everybody's understanding of that, what that looks like?
Yes, correct. We're already in the process of. So I am going to be bringing a budget sustainability report tonight, and we'll talk about some of the things that we are looking at and some of the moves that we are already making to try to make sure that we can get this done. So I'll be talking about that a little bit later tonight.
Okay, and then that question would come in there too. Where are we making sure we're including all voices in that plan, in that process?
I'd like to add that I think, to be more specific to your question, we certainly want to be able to have this done by January, no later than February, in terms of the planning for the budget for the following year, so that we're not doing this cuts closer to March like we did last year. So the commitment is that in the next 4 months, we're bringing you these budget sustainability reports, which you'll hear about in item 1. That's why we made the agenda change. With the overall intention to your question specifically, that we know by January what kind of cuts we're looking at for 25-26.
Okay. And I would just add, so thank you for that additional information. I would just add that we make plenty of time in the agenda to discuss that, right? So that's agenda management, but I'm just putting that out there in terms of being responsive to make sure that we don't have such a packed agenda that we only have a little bit of time, really manage the agenda where you have time and focus on that issue.
Sounds good.
Okay. With no additional comments, thank you. Okay, Ms. Bill.
I did want to comment that I agree with your discussion that we need to talk about this way ahead of time. And we will be talking later in the evening about the budget sustainability report. And really, I would be much happier if it didn't just say that, if it said our budget strategic plan. Because as we are looking at, we're going to talk about our financials soon, and we're going to talk about cuts that we think we need to do and how we're doing them, but there has to be a way to connect the dots. And it's something that needs to be done as we're going through the year, because we can start out with a plan for cuts and may have less money, we may have more money. And I think what I need to hear as a board member, and I'm pretty sure that the staff, the teachers, employees, the public want to hear, is where are we on that timeline? Are we doing better? Are we doing worse? And as we make these decisions for cuts, we're making them with more immediate information, not a year later or a year ahead. It's just very timely. So I'm looking forward to talking about it more at the budget sustainability report section of this agenda.
Okay, any additional comments, board members? Okay, with that, may I have a motion to accept? Or
I move to accept item 3, public disclosure of 2024-26 collective bargaining agreement for California Schools Employees Association per AB 1200.
Second.
been motion and second, all in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, motion passes. All right, thank you, Ms. Hernandez. Yeah, I think you're still here, right?
Just waiting to see
So
which
we're
one
gonna
you're
go
gonna
back
have to
to
do next.
G1.
Is that the unaudited actuals?
Unaudited,
Okay.
yes, we're gonna move back to G. Thank you.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about unaudited actuals for 23-24. So when we were talking about the AB 1200 and the negotiations, all of that we're going to be seeing in the 24-25 school year and beyond. So none of that is being included here in the unaudited actuals. And once we get all the negotiations are approved with the AB 1200, and when you approve the TA from CSEA, once all that is approved, then we'll be putting those in our budget and you will see everything in first interim. We can't do any of that until it's approved by the board. So just letting you know where we are. Oh, first interim is in December. Okay. Okay, so this is the way we focus our work. For fiscal and budget sustainability. As we project our budgets throughout the year, as we report on our fiscal transparency and our sustainability, we always must remember that at the core, the focus of the center of our work is our students, our teachers, our standards, and our content. That's how we focus everything that we do. So in this report, these are the final actuals and accruals reported at year end for unaudited actuals for 23-24. So this is, I like to call this our circle of life in school finance because it just keeps going round and round. And as we report, we are always reporting on the past, the present, and the future in all of our budgets. So the last time that we presented a budget to you, we were sitting over there in June and we were reporting adopted budget for 24-25, which is future. And we hadn't even completed the current. So the current was 23-24. Now we have completed our current budget, our one whole year of 23-24, and we're sitting over there in the yellow of our unaudited actuals. So now we know the revenue that has come in. Now we know what we have spent, all of our bills that have been paid. And prior to that moment, we didn't know those things. We were projecting. We were estimating based on historical fact. We were estimating based on what was happening in our schools and the knowledge that we bring to budgeting. But we didn't have the complete answers, and we do now. So one of the things that came as a nice happy surprise, every now and then we get happy surprises, is that our property taxes ended up coming in higher than what we had projected. So just to understand what the percentages are, when we're talking the percentages, we're always looking at an increase from the prior year to the current year. So we had been projecting, and the last time we saw you on this budget was second interim in March. And we had been projecting 5.64% because that's what the county was telling us our percentage was. Okay, so that is an increase. That 5.64 is an increase from 22-23 to 23-24. What we came in at the end of the year was 6.1%. So that's it's a little over $700,000 increase, which is excellent. So when we're looking at property tax revenue and we think about what it is the property taxes that are collected from the assessed property values around our school district. So all the homes that are sold, all the commercial properties that are sold, all the property taxes that everybody is paying. So for example, when I purchased my home in 1988, my property taxes are a lot different than my next door neighbor who purchased the home last year. So the assessed values are based on, generally speaking, what the home sold for. So I'm paying lower property taxes than my neighbor, even though our houses may be similar. And so those assessed values, as those assessed values go up across the entire region for our school district, that's the revenue that we're receiving. And so that's the growth that we're receiving. I'm going to just show you kind of an interesting budget timeline. As we are projecting in 23-24, we're also projecting in 24-25 throughout the year. And when we started 23-24, our adopted budget, the percent increase that I'm talking about right now was 5.25. That's what the county told us that our percentage was. At first interim, they told us, oh, it looks like it's going to go up to 5.64. And at second interim, it was still 5.64. And then at the end of the year, we get a report that's called a J29 that says, this is the final report of the property taxes that you've received. And in some cases, they may go up because maybe there will be a little bit of money from a prior year that got added into the current year. And sometimes they go down. We've had that happen to us. But in general, it's kind of runs about the same as it is throughout the year, but we don't really know what it's going to finally be until when August. That's when we get that J29. So as this is happening throughout the year, when we go and we estimate the adopted budget for the next year, we don't know even how we're finishing the current year. And we're trying to do an estimate again from one year to the next. Right? So that's where we have a little bit of difficulty in not really knowing, but we go by historical knowledge, right? So in this next year, in 24-25, the county assessor's office told us to estimate a 3.75%, which is a heck of a lot lower than where we ended the year at 6.1. But remember what it is. It's comparing from one year to the next. And what has happened in the prior years during COVID, property values went up consistently across a lot of areas. And so they kind of hit a higher range, which is why we went up from 6% from the 1 year. But right now, due to market values, due to interest rates, due to a lot of things outside of our control, property values are not selling as much as they were. And they're not going up as much as they were because they're not selling as much. So that's why the assessor told us to use 3.75%. Will that come in higher? I don't know. Will it come in lower? I don't know. We just have to use that percentage for now. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because we have in our negotiations with our labor partners, if that 3.75% that we are starting the year at ends up being greater than 5% at the end of the year, if it goes over 5%, then our labor partners, our staff get an increase in their salaries. That's what we negotiated. When will we know that? August. So we're going to have to wait an entire year. We will know in August when the J29 comes out, if in fact that rate is 5% or less than 5%, or if it's 3.75% or 2%, whatever it is, that's when we will know in August. So I just wanted to bring that up so that people don't get confused when they see that 6.1 in 23-24 and think it has anything to do with 24-25, and it doesn't at this point. Having so much fun up here. I'll just stay for right now. This is just a snapshot. So, we always do our multi-year projections forwards and backwards. This is I just wanted to show you where we ended the year. I just want to show you where we ended the year. And we did have a public commenter say, you know, our reserves are 18%. And yes, they are. That's where we're ending the year. Now, I want to tell you that when I did that AB 1200, one of the reasons why the cuts that we have to make in the 2 out years went down was because I asked the county if I could go ahead and adjust the beginning balance for 24-25, knowing what the ending balance was for 23-24. So that's already included in the AB 1200. We already know that that's not going to get better because this got better. We still have significant cuts to make in the next couple years. Okay, I'm going to bring Ms. Preston up.
This slide shows our unrestricted and restricted revenues. You'll see on the left, that is our estimated actuals. So that was part of the adopted budget that we brought to you in June. We were also showing you how we thought we were going to end the year. And then on the right is our unaudited actual. So that's how we actually ended the year. And you'll see on the charts that biggest chunk of money does indeed come from property taxes. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk about the changes between the two numbers. So you see we had a change in property taxes, and you'll see this amount is different from the slide that Kim showed earlier. And this is because these numbers include both unrestricted and restricted funds. And we also give all of the charter schools property taxes. So when we got more property taxes, we also ended up having to give charter schools more property taxes. And there were a couple charter schools outside of the region that were also asking for property taxes. So if any of our students go to a charter school outside of the county, we still have to pay. So there was one in San Luis Obispo and I believe one in Ventura that we weren't expecting that we would have to give property taxes to. So that's where you see that difference between the 7,000 and the 500. So actually the actual net increase was 520 after we paid out the property taxes to the charter schools. The next increase was in federal revenue, and this increase is just on the restricted side of the budget, and it was mainly due to Medi-Cal payments that we received from the state of California. State revenue also increased, and this is based on additional lottery funds, and this is on the unrestricted and the restricted side of the budget. And our lottery funds are actually still estimated. We won't receive the final allotment of lottery funds for 23-24 until October. So again, we're still estimating. We estimate based on kind of what the state is looking at as far as the lottery funds that they've received to date. So this is based on a per ADA amount. And as the state receives more lottery funds, they'll increase that per ADA amount. So that's what happened this year. They had more lottery funds. So then the ADA, the per ADA amount went up. So it helps when people go and buy lottery tickets. Our local revenue also increased, and this was due to additional interest earnings. So all that money that we keep in reserves, it's in a pool with the county treasury, and we receive interest on all of that. We also have fees that we charge the charter schools for providing various services. Those fees came in higher, and then we also had additional fees for selling old devices, and then we also got additional donations that we weren't expecting. So that gives us a total increase in revenues of 5.3 million above what we were estimating back in June. So this is our chart for the unrestricted and restricted expenditures. Again, you have estimated actuals on the left and unaudited actuals on the right. And the biggest chunk of these charts goes to salary and benefits. So that's over 80% of what we spend the funds on go to salary and benefits. And the next slide, I'll talk about the changes between the two. So we ended up spending less in salaries, almost $1 million less. And this is due to less paraeducators, mostly on the special education side. We had a decrease in some support staff, and we also ended up spending less on summer school than we had estimated. Books and supplies came in lower at almost 4 million, and this is all technology, instructional, custodial, medical, and other miscellaneous supplies. So, we give all of the school sites and departments budgets, and so if they don't spend everything that they've budgeted, then it kind of comes back and then falls to the bottom line. And the same goes for services and operating. Again, came in less, 3.8, due to travel, memberships, insurance leases, contracted services. And then finally, we have all other expenditures, and that came in at 1.7 less than we were estimating, and that was due to less capital outlay, tuition, and indirect costs. And that gives us a total at the bottom of the 10.3. Go to the next slide. So in part of those expenditure numbers are our contributions and transfers that we make. So I had mentioned we have the unrestricted and we have the restricted side of the budget. So some of the programs on the restricted side of the budget aren't fully funded. And so we have to make what we call a contribution from the unrestricted side to fully fund that program. And the same goes for the various funds that we have within the school district. So a contribution is when we're moving money within the general fund 01 between unrestricted and restricted. And then a transfer is when we're moving unrestricted general funds to another fund. So if we start at the top, you can see our biggest contribution is made to special education, and that came in lower by 3.1 million. And then the second largest contribution is to restricted maintenance. This is a requirement that's based in Ed Code that we contribute 3% of our total expenditures to restricted maintenance. There's a couple resources that we get to exclude, various one-time funds, but that's the calculation that gets done. This number here, why it's higher, is because we had to do an adjustment for a prior year contribution. So this includes a prior year and a current year. So that's why it came in higher. We were at estimated actuals, estimating that we would contribute to the after school education and safety program, but we ended up not having to. And then we also had various contributions that we make based on MOUs that came in higher as well. We also have a transfer that we make to our Fund 9, which is Santa Barbara Charter. We had to make a transfer to Fund 40, which is our reserve for capital outlay. And then we ended up not having to make a transfer to Fund 12 for child development. They were able to fund their programs with the money that they received from the federal and state governments. And that takes us to the next slide.
Okay. So there are certain things that we are required to do as part of all of our budgets. And these are the ones that we, really are always really looking at and making sure that we're doing what we're required to do. Did the district meet the CA in classroom expenditure requirement of 55%? Yes, we did. So that was one that we were really working very hard to make sure that we met that. Does the district meet the special education maintenance of effort requirements? Yes. So let me just really quickly explain what that is. Lacey had showed you the contribution that we make to special education. Special education is very much underfunded. There's funding that we receive from the federal government. There's funding we receive from the state, but we really have to then contribute from our general fund to pay the rest when it's a mandated program, but it's never been fully funded. So in order for the federal government, it's a federal government report that we have to be part of our budget show that we are maintaining the same amount of expenditures year after year. So costs will go up, but we have to show that we at least are maintaining the expenditures. And if costs go up the next year, we have to go back up and keep maintaining year after year. So as the costs go, our contribution will continue to grow if we have to maintain. Now there's some exemptions that we can use to make sure that it doesn't just skyrocket to the clouds and get us into trouble. So we are very careful to monitor those things and make sure that we are meeting the maintenance of effort. So what happens if we don't meet it? Then the federal government would require us to pay back some of our funding. So we have to be very, very careful with that. And we do meet it. And it's in two areas. We have to show that we're meeting it with our actuals, and we have to show that we are meeting it with our budgets going forward. So then the other part is the CDE requires us to be able to spend 80 to 85%. It's actually a little bit higher. It's like 81 to 86.1% of our expenditures on salaries and benefits. And yes, we do that as well. And then the final requirement that we had to make sure that we achieved with this budget was to make sure that we are spending all of our COVID-19 funding that is due by September 30, 2024. And we are doing that as well. So it's all of that large amount of COVID funding, most of it is going to be ending, and it has ended. And we just have a little bit more that will take us through the end of this month, and then it's done. I think that's the end. Yes.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, Lacey. Yeah, I'll say as well. No request to speak. Board members' comments and or questions. Ms. Beal?
So my question is similar to my question before. Is there a way, it sounds like with property taxes, we find out really in August, the whole picture. So we can't keep changing that number throughout the year. It's the number we start with, and there's a number we end it with, and there's no in between. With some of these other issues where we've spent less, do we have a way of looking at our budget? We do that cycle. We saw at the beginning, we are going to look at the budget in December. I believe we're going to look at it in February and March again, and then we do it in June. And do we have a way of looking at our expenditures and the money that's coming in? Because some of these are going to be interim numbers, and see where we're at, whether we're deficit spending or we're spending less on things, so that we have a clearer picture as we make financial decisions, especially our financial decisions we're going to make in the spring.
Yes, so that is one of the processes that we are going to be really looking at this year. And it's department budgets, it's school site budgets. When you think of the budget, when we're talking about budget, it's 30, 40 different budgets, right? So we need to look at the school sites. There were several school sites that didn't spend all their money. We have to look at our departments and see where we're not spending our money or where we need to make adjustments. And that will be part of our process that we're doing this year, looking at all of those things.
And maybe I could have Lacey come up. I think that there's also bills that come in and they don't all come in at the same time, which I think causes some of this. So can you speak a little bit to the accounting part of this, Lacey, and how those bills come in and expenditures get reconciled?
Yeah, so we basically have the whole month of July to pay all the invoices for the prior school year. Unfortunately, we don't have vendors that can always get us their invoices in that time frame. So we try to account for as many of those expenditures as we can so that it hits the current year. But we do have some that come in after the fact. So one of them would have been the summer school transportation. So I said, our transportation costs came in lower. Well, we didn't receive that invoice till like almost August. So it'll be now, we're going to have to increase the budget in 24-25 to now pay that bill.
That and I'm gonna add one more to a little bit to the point. In one of the slides we talked about paraeducators, and I want to just make sure that we clarify. It's not that we paid paraeducators less, but rather we didn't hire for some of the positions we funded it. And I'm looking around to either John Vecchio or Mr. Shetler. Can you just or Kim or Lacey, can you confirm that? Because I want to make sure that we're clear that you listed that as an expenditure that we saved some money in to an extent.
Yeah, so for the special ed paraeducators, there are two adjustments to the budget. Remember that we moved money into contracted services from salaries and benefits for paras in order to bring in the Maxim contract. But in addition to that, there were still unfilled paraeducator positions, and so that showed up as the difference.
I'd like to ask Lacey a question, just a clarification. So you had said that an invoice came in after July. So while it seemed like we spent less on transportation, are you saying now that cost is going to go into 24, 25? So it's going to look like we spent more? Okay, so some of those invoices that weren't realized in July are going to be transferred to the following year. So it's not really a savings, it's the cost is just being transferred to a different financial year. Okay, that's good to know. And when I think about these things, you know, you have a budget and then here come invoices and some things you're not going to know until the end of the year. But when I think about how we exhibit our financials to everybody so that we understand it, it would be like, this is what we have budgeted, this is what we spent. These are expense, we still have to pay these out. So here's a number that we have yet to spend. We're still expecting to spend that. And we're sort of keeping track of that number, that if a surprise comes in December, that we're like, oh, we got more or we got less, that we make, once again, smart financial decisions later on. So just an easy way to understand it. Sometimes it's really, I think, challenging for all of us at the end of the year to kind of wait for the drop, right? Are we above? Are we below? And so this year we are well above. And I'm sure that doesn't feel great after going through some very complicated negotiations. We kind of understand why that happened. But it would have been great if we had as much information as we do now, if we had some of it ahead of time when we were making our reduction in force cuts, because we might have been able to look at that a little bit differently, maybe not in a big way, but a little bit differently.
Mr. Banning.
I have a couple of different questions. First of all, Kim, when you were talking about the property tax and the difference between the adopted budget and then the J29 at the end, this is a difference that affects us specifically as a community funded district. And I think that's important to recognize. Most districts in the state, it doesn't matter what happens to their property tax because the state backfills everything to get them up to that point they're supposed to be. It's only for the districts where we exceed that is as important as it is in this budget.
That's correct. And
So-
those districts, the LCFF districts, they also receive money every single month and they know what that money is going to be. And we receive chunks of property tax money. We do receive state money as well, not as much, but we do receive our biggest in chunks. So it's very difficult.
So I know you haven't been here a long time, but do you know about how long the district has been community funded on a stable basis?
I think it was 2017.
Okay, so it's not a long
Yeah.
time that we're experiencing this, and you know, I'd like to say that that adjusting to that difference in funding, getting more if property taxes are more, getting what you did budget if you did, it takes a while to figure some things out, and sometimes you've alluded to the fact of them getting money on a regular basis as opposed to big hunks. What we see in the projections for basic aid are often lagging with what the indicators of what happens with the state. So that a couple of years ago, the state was flush with money and there were increases in that final year of the settlement. And yet we didn't see that money that year. We saw it a year later. I just think there's some complexities around the funding models that we have to walk about. And I want to acknowledge Mr. Block's comments about conservative budgeting. And as we're trying to figure all these pieces out, the thing that is different between a basic aid and a regular, an LCFF district, is when the state revenues go down to whatever degree, they continue to backfill. We get benefit when property taxes are higher than they're expected, but we don't get bailed out when they're lower than expected. We have to spend less when that happens. And so I think that's an important piece to understand. And the volatility of our budget is slightly different. We've only been doing it for 5 years. There are districts that have been doing it for 30 and 40 and 50 years that with basic aid. So the other are truly just questions. That was comments to make sure I understood things properly. You mentioned giving property taxes to charter schools. Is it, was not under the impression that increased property taxes that push us further into basic aid required us or caused us to have to put more property taxes to charter schools.
Yeah, that is the case. So it's called in lieu of property taxes, and when ours goes up the same, we have to do a calculation based on the charter's ADA and the amount that theirs also goes up. So we have Adelante Charter School, Peabody, and Santa Barbara Charter, and then Lacey mentioned every now and then we'll get, there's Grizzly Academy, I think, up at San Luis Obispo area. Every now and then we'll have a student that's up there, and whatever that in lieu of property taxes amount is now, whatever our property taxes is, we have to pay those charter schools based on that amount.
So we're not responsible for just paying what our equivalent LCFF value would be. We have to pay more based on more property taxes.
Yeah, please.
And this is only because we are a basic aid community funded school district. If we were LCFF, we wouldn't have to give any money to the charter schools. So it's another little caveat.
All right. I still have some learning to do on that. The last question was about maintenance of effort. It's often frustrating to imagine that efforts to become more efficient in special education and save money while continuing to provide excellent services can put you at risk of saying, no, you have to spend more.
That's correct.
Because of that. Are there specific exemptions for things that, for example, what happens if a very expensive student ages out of the district? Somebody
Yes.
that you're paying for non-public school for, do you
That-
still, yeah.
That is an exemption, yes. So any what they call high cost students that leave your district, that is an exemption that you can use to kind of lower your expenditures because you're no longer paying that. If there are staff members that are in special education that leave voluntarily, they can't be, fired or pushed out in any way, voluntarily leave, that's one of those exemptions. I'm trying to think of if your enrollment goes down, that is also an exemption. But
Okay.
we looked at it this year and our enrollment in special education went up. So we can't use that as an exemption. But if we had students that graduated that are no longer in our programs, whether they be regional programs or non-public school placement, then we could use those as exemptions to help bring our expenditures, the baseline down.
Thank you.
Additional questions, Mr. Escobedo?
Just one question. And it's piggybacking off of a question that Dr. Beal had, but about the tax percentage, the property tax percentage. So you came up with the 3.75 because you were in contact with the county assessor's office, is that right?
Correct.
And so as we move throughout the year through the budget cycle, when we get to first interim or second interim, you're also getting an additional touch point because throughout the year, and I imagine closer to second interim than first interim, the county assessor's office has a little bit more information because I remember, I think it was second interim where you all had talked with the county assessor's office and they felt pretty confident that it was going to be within a percentage point of the original, I think it was 5.6. I forget what the number is now.
Yes. Correct.
So by the time we get to there, as you're talking to the county assessor's office, we're not just setting it and forgetting it.
Right, right. So if you think about when property taxes are paid, when we, those of us who own our homes, when we pay our property taxes, that's when the county assessor's office knows how much property taxes is coming in. So there is a report that we received from the county ed office that tells us, I believe, in November, we will get a report that will say, this is what the estimate is for the rest of the year. And so we'll be able to adjust that for first interim, and we may get a report around second interim because that's March, because people are paying their property taxes, April. And so we do keep track of that throughout the year, and we will adjust it when we know what it is. And then we'll know again when we're the reason I talked about that J29, that was specifically in the language of our negotiations, was if that J29 is higher is higher than 5% from the end of the year, then it would be the next year we would show that increase to the salaries.
Right.
Hopefully that
Thank you
helps.
for that. And just thinking into the future, because today we have a budget sustainability report, and we're going to continue to have those as we get closer to that March deadline, that we
Yes.
will have more information as we get closer to that time. So even
Yeah.
though now we may not have that information, as we get closer, we'll have more of the context to make some of those tough decisions that Dr. Beal was talking about.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just want to comment that to the points that you're all making. First of all, you're all now a lot more aware and we're all much more informed of the process and the estimations and the projections. And I do want to recognize the public comments we're hearing, because it appears that we're hiding money or we're changing numbers, but they truly are moving numbers that happen for a reason. And as best as we can, we will continue to use that language to clarify estimates and projections, which I know makes all of us uneasy. And therefore, the numbers will look different each time, which I think sometimes people feel that that's a lack of trust or confidence in what we're doing. And I just want to thank Kim and Lacey, because they do a good job of tracking all those things. And we'll try to mark as much as we can when we come here to the board to make these reports. Here's a significant change. In September, we said it was 3.75. Here we are in November. Now we're showing you it's changed, or, whatever that is, because it is true. The numbers change, but they're not changing because we're doing any kind of shell game or creating some kind of hiding of the numbers. I just want to kind of reiterate that it's really important for me to try to remember that as a leader, and then for all of us to kind of keep that in mind as well. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think to just to add on to that, just making sure we're connecting processes where it comes in, because sometimes we're making, in February, we're talking about something and then something's happening in March, just making those connections, how and why we're moving. So I do have a comment just to add on, actually a question and a comment just to add on to the charter school process. Now, I don't want our charter schools getting all, I'm just asking the question for clarification because we have good relationships with them. But my question is, when you stated that every now and then we will get something from another charter school, is that a charter school that's within what we've already approved, our list of approved charter schools? So if you're a charter school, I don't know, and one of our students in our boundaries can go there, and then we have to do that, I'm not.
Yes.
Is that a law? Is that something we need to change? Because that's I'm just saying, that's not beneficial in terms of particularly, in times of lean times, but even trying to budget if if something coming out of the, everybody wanted to go somewhere.
We had an interesting example of that, that we actually resolved, and it ended up not being our students, but we received a bill from a Ventura Independent Study program for some students that we could not figure out if they were ours, but they were actually in a home for students that were sex trafficked. And so, they were in this home, and then going to school over there. And we didn't know who they were. So we did a lot of research on there. We talked to the different groups, tried to figure out what it was. And it turned out that they were not our students. They actually were another school district students. But we're really careful to research that, and then also talk to those groups. Like, if you're opening up homes in our area, send those students to our schools. Why would you go to Ventura? We have independent studies. We have our own programs. So it, and we didn't know, this just showed up. So sometimes we have no idea and they just show up. So we would like the community to understand, if these homes or different sort of situations like this open up, please talk to us. Please talk to us at the school district so we can make sure that all students receive the services that they need and the care that they need.
So are those homes have to register with that county office of ed? Where do they have to register, where you would know, other than through this communication? We hope you do that.
Yes.
But where in the process, where they're registering to be that we could be included?
That I don't know. I would have to kind of research that, but we do have charters that will just, move into the area.
Yeah, that kind of defeats the purpose of approving charters. If it,
Yeah.
What's that whole person? I think that's something we might want to consider and look at. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
at the county office of ed level. I don't know that, but it's just something that I was just thinking about. Particularly when we have to figure out, we're gonna have to pay for them.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to say on that part. And also, so if we're placing a student for out of the area services, and we know that, right? So are we,
Yes.
is that part of the fiscal process to know we
Y-
potentially may be
yes.
having to pay, so
Yeah.
it's in there? Okay.
Correct. So a good example of that would be a non-public school student placement.
Okay.
So if a student has that need and the IEP team determines that that is the appropriate place for that student to receive the help that they need, the services that they need, then that, yes, we're fully aware of that process. And those, those are pretty hefty costs, but it's more important for us to make sure that the student gets the services that they need. So, but we are fully aware of those cases, yes.
And then the other question is just a process accounting question. So when you spoke the fact that we do get late invoices and we have people who do that because of their processes, don't we have an accrual process of those contracts that are in existence, so that even though we may get them late August, late December, that we still know that we have this potential expenditure, so it's not going on to the next year because that service was provided within a different fiscal year? So how are we handling?
We do have accrual processes as you're describing. Every now and then we will have something like that where a department or a school site or someone is keeping track of that, and they don't realize that they haven't gotten the last bill or whatever it is. Those are the ones that kind of, I don't want to say slip through the cracks because we know we're getting that service, but it ends up going into the next year just because it didn't get accrued.
But what if that service was provided in the fiscal year, so, but it becomes a liability in the next year? So how are we accounting for that?
Yeah.
Because wouldn't that be like an audit exception? Meaning,
Yeah.
I'm just asking, just
Yeah,
because I
no.
just deal with it every day,
That-
so.
That is correct. That it should be accounted for in the current year where the services are occurring. That is correct.
So we're making adjustment perhaps
Mhm.
in our audited.
So the auditors generally have like a threshold that they look at. So they're only going to make the adjustment if it's material.
Yeah.
And generally, the only invoices that we see come through that are material are going to be for our facilities, our construction invoices. So that's in like the 100,000+ range. So we monitor all invoices going through that are getting paid all the way through like mid-August. But at some point we have to kind of like have the numbers be final. But we do monitor, and we try our best to catch as much as we can.
Yeah, I was just thinking about in terms of for the accounting piece that we had a service done in 23-24, but we're paying it and putting it on the books for 24-25. So that's certainly, again, to your point about it being a threshold, but I'm just looking at process and policy. I know that because we deal with that from time to time with vendors. We do that with school districts, that sometimes they don't close their books till August. So we know, so we anticipate and accrue that expenditure. So just trying to make sure they're in the right years so that it doesn't look like we're spending less when in fact that service was provided in that year. So I just wanted to just follow up on the process with regards to that. So thank you for that. Are there any additional comments or questions? May I have a motion for approval, please?
I will motion to approve the 2023-24 fiscal year unaudited actuals.
I'll second.
Okay, been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And next, we're moving to G2, adoption of resolution 2024-2509, adopting the 2023-24 GAN limit. Mhm.
Well, while they're pulling that up, just so that you understand what a GAN limit is, it's kind of an interesting thing. So in 1978, the voters voted on Proposition 4, and the intent of that proposition was to say, we want to maintain, it's kind of like the maintenance of effort idea, is to try to maintain the expenditures at the state level at 1978 level forevermore. So we're going to set that level and we're going to call that the GAN limit. And that amount can change based on population changes and cost of living changes. But the idea was to make sure that the state didn't just keep growing the costs. So that's what that is. Now, so here's the resolution. And it's pretty much that. It's for all public agencies. So us included, we have to provide the scan limit report. It's something that comes right out of our budgeting process. And it's compares from one year to the next to see how much you have grown in your expenditures. And every single public agency does a GAN limit report and sends it to the state. And then the state compiles all of it and includes that in the total expenditures for the state. So I'll let you read those. Do you want me to read it or?
Board members, do you need, I think we've read it in our packets. We don't need additional reading on it. Okay, good. All right, then any additional, nope, request to speak on this item. Board members, any comments or questions on the resolution? Okay, hearing none, may I have a motion for approval?
I move to adopt resolution 2024-25-09, adopting the 23-24 GAN limit.
I second.
Been motion is second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will now move to G4, approval of human resources. Dr. Vecchio.
Pause 1 second. I'm getting a message that we might have had a public comment that was missed. If we can pause for a second.
This is my fault and I apologize. We have one for F14, the STEAM and DPEA agreement for Sean Fetterbush.
And just to clarify, Mr. Fetterbush, that item has been approved by the board.
Yeah.
But please,
So-
we're welcome your comments.
I'm so sorry.
I'm done here. My work is done here. Sorry, Mr. Becky.
That's my fault. I apologize.
Very good.
Welcome.
I'm Sean Fetterbush. I teach STEAM at Adams Elementary. Some of you have been at Adams, and thank you for your support. Before I start my formal comments, I just want to acknowledge my STEAM colleagues in the back from Washington and Franklin and Cleveland. And we thought it was important tonight to show up and put on a jacket and say thanks and share some good share. You know, you guys have a hard job, and I listen to most of the board meetings, and maybe it's good to remember the things that we get right in this community. So I thought I'd show up. Thanks to the unending support of Denise Alvarado. She has been a huge advocate, and I just want to recognize her. So, members of the board, I'm here to speak to you tonight on the MOU agreement between Santa Barbara Unified School District and the Dos Pueblos Engineering Academy. For the past 8 years, many people have worked tirelessly to bring a comprehensive STEAM education to our elementary schools. This journey began with a vision inspired by the success of the Dos Pueblos Engineering Academy, funded by Emily and Amir Obo-Shair in 2002. DP has shown us the transformative power of integrating science, technology, engineering, art, math, and a project-based learning environment. Last year's pilot program was a resounding success with our STEAM team developing and implementing 2 innovative projects, both of them with the collaboration with DPA staff. This MOU builds on the success and provides a framework for expanding and enhancing STEAM education across our district. This agreement will foster the collaboration between SBUSD, DPA, and other districts, allowing us to share resources, expertise, and best practices. It will support our STEAM teachers with dedicated time for planning, professional development, and curriculum creation. Most importantly, it will give our students access to cutting-edge STEAM labs and engaging hands-on projects and nurture creativity, critical thinking, and problem-solving skills. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to the board, the DPA Foundation, and all the educators who have worked so hard to make this possible. Your commitment to this innovation and education is truly commendable. Looking ahead, I'm filled with optimism. This MOU lays the groundwork for the robust district-wide STEAM program that will prepare our students for challenging and opportunities of the 21st century. It's a significant step forward in making Santa Barbara a leader in the elementary STEAM education. So thank you for your time and consideration. Thank you for approving the MOU. And in the STEAM group, we have a great group of teachers, and we read this often. We prepare students for a world that is yet to be created. We think the STEAM education there's no other place to make that come true. And just want to thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Board members, if you recall, Mr. Fetterbush shared some of the great projects we saw in June. So thank you for that as well, and the rest of you that are here with them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Dr. Vecchio.
Good evening, Board President Sims Moten, board members, Superintendent Maldonado. This first item is the Human Resources recommendations. Just wanted to point out a couple items to the board and public tonight. First, I do want to just recognize the first two items, Jose Jimenez and Emily Stokes. This was something that came before the board previously. The reclassification of JJ Jimenez, and then also the approval by this board of the Health Careers Academy coordinator position and the development of that program. And we went out and searched and found Emily Stokes, and that's on the list tonight. So congratulations to those two, and thank you to the board. I do want to turn your attention as well to a few promotions. We have Stephanie Aguilar, Marco Flores, Sandra Salazar, Francisco Ciordia Jr., and Susan Urbina Aguilera, all on the list tonight for classified promotions. So congratulations to them. And then also we have Melissa Ruiz under classified premium pay for a bachelor's degree. And then we have well, quite a few for language premium pay. They've passed the assessment. We'll add the premium pay. Jocelyn Chavez, Minerva Moreno, Rodolfo Rivera, Emmanuel Saavedra, Israel Vega, and Elizabeth Wilson. So thank you to them and congratulations. And with that, I'll turn the list over to you for consideration. Thank you.
Any requests to speak on this item? Okay. Board members, thank you for your presentation. Board members, any comments or questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion for approval?
I'll move to approve the Human Resources recommendations.
Been
Second.
motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, now we'll move to G5, approval of tentative agreements between California. Oh, yeah, this print coming up. Association Santa Barbara Unified 2025 non-management salary schedules.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm very happy and excited to bring this item to you tonight. These agreements, and I'll just hold them up because this is a very thick packet, which is a testament to how much work happened in the CSEA negotiations around many, many articles. I do want to thank well, I think we have our leader here. Yes, Ken Rivas is here, and I want to thank him and the team that he assembled. Both the CSEA and SB Unified team worked pretty long hours on some really complex contract language. You'll see all the articles listed, but in those articles are really complex language that we toiled over to make sure that the working conditions for our employees are the best they can be. Items like items like overtime, comp time, vacation accrual, and reclassification were all items that we worked together on. In fact, Carlos Lopez, our CSEA labor rep, and Kenya Edison led us through a interest-based process related to the reclassification language, which really got us some very good process language around that we are very hopeful to implement and hopeful for. So I want to thank Kenya and Carlos Lopez for that. And with that, this item actually is an approval of all that tentative agreement. We gave you the strikeout language in there so you could see the changes, but also it's an item that's approving the new salary schedules as well, because there had to be changes to that. So with that, I'll open it up for your consideration. Any questions you have?
Any requests to speak? Yes.
Yes, we have one speaker, Ken Rivas. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm glad we're not doing this at 10:30. So, first of all, good evening again to all the school board members and
Is your mic on?
administration staff. There we go.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so again, good evening to all the administrative staff, the board members, president, and you're all here. And I'm up here on behalf of all our classified employees to say that we certainly hope you support this hard work that we've put together. But we came up with the tentative agreement for the next 3 years. And again, I want to thank the team, the district's team, because yes, we did work very hard together on that, many of them, and we got through it. And it was just this go around for the successor agreement. It was again, with doing the interest-based bargaining, that component that was added partway in, that was very helpful for us to really get together and look at our differences, come to some compromises, and put it all together. So that was really good work, as John mentioned. But again, that's all I'm here to say. And but I do want to make another comment on the side, and that's of the board members that you come back and I see that you know, you're asking a lot of questions, and I see you're engaged, and it's just like you guys came back with an A game. You're doing your homework, you're coming back, and you know, whether it's open-ended questions, closed questions, or you know, right to specific to the items, it's all good stuff that I'm seeing from the board. And I just want to like commend you for that, because I just think that's you know, something that it's just like last year was last year, but this year, I mean, there's just a lot more going on. I mean, I mean, you guys come in, you're prepared, and you're asking the questions, and I just think that's great. That's great from my perspective, you know, from my lens. So anyhow, thank you.
Thank you.
Here, no additional comments, board members' comments or questions. Hearing none, may I have a motion for approval?
Wait, can I make?
Oh, go ahead.
If no one else is gonna make comments, I'll make a few comments. I do want to thank both negotiating teams. In particular, I do want to thank the CSEA negotiating team for entering into interest-based bargaining with us. I think it proved quite fruitful, and areas where we had to concede in certain points because of the interest that we had agreed upon as two negotiating teams. And I think it was quite insightful and helpful that when you presented your sunshine letter, that there was rationale for each article that you wanted to open. So it told us, okay, here's where they're coming from. And it was quite clear from the beginning. Something that I hope we can continue as a process into the future, maybe even on our side as well. I think for me, it's clear that you also had a CSEA rep that was well prepared and willing to engage in this process with us, and really with your negotiating team along with ours and the leadership of folks like Miss Edison, the problem solving mentality, because your group in particular, you have so many positions and so many folks that have interests that you have to weigh amongst many priorities. And I think that this negotiation was quite fruitful, and I am very appreciative of the partnership, and just wanted to highlight the leadership that you all displayed and your CSEA rep displayed throughout this process, as well as our district team. So thank you.
Thank you. Now, may I have a motion?
I move to approve the tentative agreement between California School Employees Association and Santa Barbara Unified School District and corresponding 24-25 classified non-management salary schedules.
I second.
Been motion second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move to. Now we'll move to G6, approval of permanent placement agreement with ProCare Therapy. That's you, Dr. Becchio?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you very much. So this item is coming before you in response to a late August, just before school start, resignation of a teacher in, not only a teacher, but a teacher in a very, probably the most difficult position to fill, which is a moderate, severe special education classroom position. In our attempt to find someone to start the school year, we did hear from I keep saying Procore, but it's not Procore, it's ProCare. Thank you. And they did have a qualified teacher that had signed on with their agency and offered her placement in that classroom on a permanent placement agreement, which is different than a contract employee agreement. And I tried to describe that in your memo, but I'll explain it real quickly. Typically, we will get employee agreements, which is the employee is an employee of the agency and they house them in our schools in a position, and then we pay that agency their salary and then some. So usually an hourly rate and then their overhead fees. This is a permanent employee placement agreement, which is different in the sense that they charge us an upfront fee for the finder's fee, so to speak, and then we actually employ the person as our employee. So this is really a little bit more advantageous for us financially as long as the person stays, for example, if they stay for the year, we're much better off having a permanent employee placement agreement than we are the agency contractors agreement. So this one is coming before you to get approval so that we can move forward with the onboarding and placement of this teacher in the classroom. With that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Any requests to speak on this item? Board members, any comments or questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion for approval?
I move to approve the permanent placement agreement with ProCare Therapy.
I second.
Been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
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 Thank you. That motion passes. Next, we move. Thank you, Dr. Vecchio. We now move to G7, approval of agreement between Loyola. It is 7:30 and I still can't talk. Marymount University and Santa Barbara Unified School District provide emergent multilingual learners master plan services.
Are you Dr. Sheffield?
Is that? Oh, okay.
Is your mic on?
I think you can hear me now. Okay. Good evening, board members, Dr. Maldonado, President Sims Moten. I bring forward this MOU agreement between Loyola Marymount University and Santa Barbara Unified School District. But prior to bringing the agreement forward, I want to just share a little bit about how we got to this position and where we are in the process and wanting to develop an EL master plan. In 2019, 2020, the leadership before me brought forward the Meta plan, and that was a pivotal time, and it was a document and an approach that really opened doors to multilingualism and created that pathway into embracing multilingualism, not just for the dual immersion at McKinley, and also fostering the continuation of the Adelante Charter to the junior high and high school, but also brought awareness to the value of just world languages and having that asset-based approach to just education in general. However, within that process, there is another need in which is to articulate an EL master plan specifically for emergent multilingual learners in the dual immersion setting, as well as the sheltered immersion setting. So the EL master plan has a different purpose, and the purpose is to delineate those services and articulate our systems in one document as we are aligning our contributions, as we are streamlining our systems, and as we are having a shared understanding in how we serve emergent multilingual learners in both settings, in the dual immersion setting and also in the sheltered immersion setting. So it does have a distinct purpose, Typically, they do have a format in which it is very driven by a lot of our compliance responsibilities, and to ensure that we not only identify them effectively and place them effectively, also monitor their progress and have those systems in place in how we monitor not just language acquisition, but academics. There's also a section on curriculum and instruction and assessment, and how that is has a nuance based if you have a newcomer versus a long-term English learner versus that learner that is just continuously developing language. So this effort would require also enlisting stakeholders. It would also require guidance, and which looking at different service providers, I did feel that this service provider, the university really had a robust approach in where we would be effective in a short period of time. So I would enlist key leaders that would help me and help us in develop a plan. And then there's another layer of advisory committee that we would form. And the university would be that support that in comparison to the many plans that exist, we would want to have one of the best, robust, and comprehensive plans for our emergent multilingual learners. So this is a partnership that will help us accomplish that.
Does that conclude your presentation?
That is it. If
Okay.
there are any questions or comments.
Any requests to speak on this item? Board members, any comments or questions? Dr. Bill?
How will this partnership dovetail in with our LCAP and also our EML parents at schools? Like, is this something they'll be assessing in terms of, you talk about services? This is try to, I think, have a comprehensive service plan, correct? How do we meet these needs?
Yes.
If I'm understanding correctly.
So what they do typically is they take us through a process so that we basically, all of our processes that exist, we maintain them, enhance them, perfect them. A lot of the pieces in which could make our system better come through in that process. So it is an effort in which they bring their expertise from the perspective of having supported many districts doing this, but we have the expertise in-house because we are the ones who employ all these practices. And all of these practices and processes are in various spaces. We have some processes that live in a space and a different space, and there is a need to memorialize it all in one handbook per se. And that also helps the community to understand how we serve emergent multilingual learners in both programs, the dual immersion program and in the sheltered English immersion program.
So is this a 1-year partnership or is it like kind of like SWIFT that was supporting our MTS? I'm trying to understand our interaction.
Okay.
Having done this work in L Unified for EMLs, this document guides curriculum, instruction, assessment, monitoring, identification, parent notification, initial LPAC progress. It basically lays out what our programs and services should look like. It's a document that lives on, so they come and help us develop it. The LCAP, as you know, was done with part of the information being around Meta and the dual language, but it doesn't address as much on what are we doing in it when it comes to those students who are not in dual language, but are also EMLs. And so it's more of a document that will guide the whole system for all the things I mentioned. We should look at LCAP as part of that process, but it will inform also as we look at next year's LCAP and what kinds of adjustments we should make. And then you had another question about EML parents. So in the plan, it includes a section of how you engage parents, both in just informing them about what services their children should need, what to expect in terms of how they grow and learn a second language, but also the DEMLAC, the MLAC, and what they should do. So it's very comprehensive in ensuring we meet state and federal requirements for this protected class of students. I hope that helps to clarify it a little further, but it's a guiding document that lives on.
So just to clarify, they will set up this comprehensive like overlook at every student who qualifies as an MLAC student in the programs. So again, 1 year, or how does it
The,
work?
the intent is to compile or create a draft that we would bring to the board approximately in April. So the contract is a year, or what's left of the school year. Our contract would end in June. And they're basically advisory.
Thank you. That answers my question.
I will add that what it does too is it helps teachers understand with more clarity the program that they're delivering. So we've heard a lot of comments about teachers feeling like they need to translate everything for students. If they're in a structured English immersion program, when I was a teacher, we used to think that way in terms of a bilingual program or how we provide that language support. With the new framework by the state of California, with the structured English immersion program, we actually do what's called integrated ELD, which you'll hear more about later, but it does a little bit of that too. They will help us really define for teachers the kinds of supports and services that they deliver. Because as I hear comments and I see some practices, there's a lot of clarification that still needs to happen.
Mr. Escobedo.
And so I'm thank you for your report, and this is exciting. So every once in a while we get to hear from principals about what they're doing on their campuses, and you hear about the successes, and you hear about particularly at elementaries what they're doing to support their EML students. And there are really, that's the opportunity, right? Before you have a smaller number of emails, you can probably do your most positive supports in that setting. Will this create more consistency amongst each of our schools?
Yes, because you create a shared understanding as to how to approach and what methodology to employ when you're specifically calling out curriculum instruction assessment. There are many other pieces to the master plan, but that's one of them.
Thank you.
Ms. Munoz?
Yeah, so it sounds like a great improvement in terms of the framework and how it will advance the services that we provide and learn from the partnership with Loyola Marymount in terms of what they've done with other schools. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
We have not written an EL master plan in this district, to my knowledge. So this would be our first EML master plan.
And we hope to
Excellent.
lead the
Yeah.
county of Santa Barbara in that work.
Yes.
We'll have to check with our colleagues, but this is something that's long been needed.
Long overdue.
Yes.
I just have one final comment. So thank you for connecting the Meta program, because there's a lot of work went into that program. And certainly from the community coming in, I know Ms. Munoz was the liaison to the board to that committee. So I just want to appreciate recognizing that program, because a lot of work is there, and how then we expand on that program so people can recognize my work wasn't in vain and it's not being dismissed. So I really want to acknowledge that and appreciate that as well. So with no further comments or questions, may I have a motion for approval?
Go ahead.
Oh, I make a motion to approve the agreement between Loyola Marymount University and Santa Barbara Unified to provide the EML master plan services during the development process of the master plan, to ensure it adheres to the state and federal law requirements for EMLs.
Second.
Been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
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 Thank you. Yes. Next, we'll move to G8, approval of ongoing contracts for fiscal year 24-25. Ms. Edison.
Yes, good evening. You recall back in June 25th, 2024, Student and Family Services brought up our bundle. We highlighted some partnerships that we were still talking about, negotiations around what would be included in the contract and which school sites. Tonight, we're bringing a couple of those forward. One is our Freedom for Youth contract, our HA contract, and then our contract for legal services for special education. So those are just adding to our bundle that already came forward.
Thank you. Any requests to speak on this item? Request. Board members, any comments or questions? Thank you for your presentation. May I have a motion for approval?
I move to approve the ongoing contracts for fiscal year 24-25.
I second the motion.
Been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. All right, we'll move to G9, approval of 24-25 LCAP. Mr. Stevens.
Good evening, board members, President Sims Moten, Superintendent. I'm bringing to you an update regarding our LCAP. So the county reviews our LCAP, and so whatever changes they discover, they ask us to follow through with those changes. The good news is that the integrity and intent of the contact, or integrity and intent of the LCAP is intact from everyone involved. By the way, there were 19 of 20 school districts, because it was a new template, had to do corrections with the LCAP. So there was one school district that was luckier. So with that in mind, I supplied 2 copies of the updated LCAP. One had highlighted sections, and the other one would be the one that would be approved. Giving you some examples. So for our indicators, normally we would just put standards met, but they had asked to put a little more specifics regarding the indicator with these 2 indicators for actually their LCAP goals, or not goals, sorry. It's part of the bucket of instruction that's required of the dashboard. So that's what it is. We had to provide specific language in terms of this particular measure. So we included EMLs, and that was actually the intent. Originally, it was special education, and that caused a problem with the compliance of this. So we had goal number 4, which is designed for La Cuesta, and specifically it's a focus goal. So we actually had to include more specifics. So that's why you see all of the highlighted items there. And lastly, if you review the budget documents, you'll notice that none of the budget numbers were adjusted, so they stayed true. And any adjustments had to do specifically with language, and also whether it was limited or district-wide. So, and that's the end of my report. Any questions?
Any requests to speak from the public on this item? Board members, any comments or questions? This item? Hearing none, I just have a final comment. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for all the work, everybody, going into getting this to this stage of approval. So glad to see it here. And Dr. Bill, I know you were part of that throughout the whole year, and so appreciate the work that's going in to get this report here and ready to report. Looking forward to hearing updates throughout the year. With that, I need a motion for approval.
I will move to approve the 2024-25 Local Control Accountability Plan, LCAP update for Santa Barbara County Education Office.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, been motion and second. All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Vance. All right, board members, that concludes our action agenda. And I'm wondering if we want to take a 6-minute break, which would bring us back here at 8 o'clock before we hear the final report. How do the board members feel about that? Okay, we will take a 6-minute break. I think that's what it says on the clock. So we'll be back at 8 o'clock. Okay, we'll now move to our, yes. We're gonna now move to our budget sustainability report.
Okay, now it's on. Okay, I'm gonna jump ahead to a different slide. We're gonna start here. So as we're talking, we've talked a lot tonight about budget and how we're going to be really looking very in-depth at ways that we can make cuts, that we can change the way we are doing business, really, is what we're going to try to do. These are some of the areas that we are definitely going to be looking at, trying to identify, you know, savings, potential savings, excessive spending, those kinds of things. And that's what this budget sustainability report is tonight, is we're going to look at one of those things that we're looking at, because I just want to show you a process that we have created that's brand new. And so that's what this is tonight. So I'm going to go back. We're looking tonight about travel and conferences and how we can manage those. You know, we had a lot of public discussion last year about looking at travel and conferences. And so we've heard our public and we want to take a real good look at that. So we've established a committee that's going to be looking at these things. And right now we have frozen travel and conferences, like stopping them right now to make sure that we can really assess these ideas and see if we can save some money. And we have a committee that's going to be looking at it. So we're going to go forward. This is our process for exemptions to that frozen travel and conferences and the process that we're using for it. So we start out with either a staff member or a supervisor or a principal or someone along those lines says that, you know, I really want my staff person or persons to travel to this conference or whatever it is that they feel is very, very important, because we've frozen it. So they have to determine that it's very important that they go. Then the principals will then talk to the principals, or the department managers will talk to the assistant superintendent for that department. And that assistant superintendent then needs to make that assessment with all the backup and the documentation as to whether or not it truly is something that they want to bring forward. It truly is important that these staff members travel to this conference. Then it goes to the Budget Sustainability Committee, and we look at, we have a decision criteria that we look at, and the assistant superintendent, you know, presents the idea to the committee, and this is why we feel like it's important. So those are some of the decision criteria down there. Does it meet some sort of compliance? For example, is it something that, because we have received some sort of funding, that funding requires the person to go get certified, go to a conference, whatever it is? If that's a requirement, then we want to look at that. We want to look at the impact to student learning and the programs. Is it a program that is really important to something, initiative that we're looking at for our students? We look at the funding source, and the impact to the district's goals, the district's needs. Okay, so that's what we do. And forward. So we did that. We had our first committee. It was really, really great. I'll go back again so you can see who is on the committee. So myself, the assistant superintendent of business services, the superintendent or a designee, the assistant superintendent of human resources, a classified manager, and 3 principals. And then the assistant superintendent who is bringing the item forward. Okay. So the principals and the classified manager, we have said, if you want to just zoom in, stay at your school site. We don't need you to travel to this. We just, you know, want to have you there for this committee. And it was very, very interesting. We actually got a lot out of it. We looked at 3 different requests. One was a request for the IB program, the International Baccalaureate teachers. We have 5 teachers at Harding and 1 teacher at Dos Pueblos. And these are paid for by site funds and Title III. We had a national NACAC, National Conference for Counselors. These are 6 counselors at Santa Barbara High, and it's paid for by the Santa Barbara Foundation. We had 2 different conferences for speech and language pathologists, 11 of them, and psychologists, 11 of them. And this is paid for with Medi-Cal funds. So we looked as a committee at the request for travel. We went through the decision criteria to try to determine if this was something that, you know, we all agreed as a committee that it was important that these folks travel to these things. And we really looked at the funding source, because none of these things really impact general fund. So then this is what the committee decided. We, as a group, we decided that all three we approved, but we also had some comments and some considerations that we wanted to make public. So for example, the IB teachers, we want to make sure that when someone is bringing forward a request to travel to a conference, that all of the costs are included. And some of those costs are here in our district. If we are going to have to pay for a substitute teacher to fill that spot as those people are traveling, that's a cost. And we need to know what those costs are. And so we added a place on the form where that would be included. We also asked that the principals to really look at the teachers who are traveling. Do all 5 need to go from Harding? So the IB program, it turns out that there is a part of this funding means that teachers have to go to this conference over a period of time. I believe it was 5 years. So we were asking like which teachers have already gone, so really have the principal really assess who needs to travel. So then the second part was for the counselors. The committee actually expressed some concern about leaving only one counselor at the high school if all of them went. So we want to make sure that the principal or whoever is bringing the request understands the impact back at home. When they're sending people to travel, we need to make sure that the teachers and the students and everybody are covered, right? So we want to make sure that that is understood. So the principals need to give us that information. And then for the student language SLP, speech language pathologists and the psychologists, we had asked questions about when the different dates were. We got that information. We discussed something that we actually included in our process now. And we wanted to make sure that we understood when people travel and they're going out to do something to get some information, to get some tools, to get some processes, that we want to make sure they bring them back and help us to improve our district, help improve our students, help improve our classrooms, whatever it is. We want to make sure that is brought back to us because we're paying for that. And it's important. So we added a comment section for any of our concerns, and we also added a form. So let me go to the next one for them to bring back. So it's like we're calling it a conference reflection, and we would like that to be back 5 days after the return, that form would be filled out and we go to their supervisor, but it would also come, I'm assuming it's going to come to me because I'm going to be keeping all these in a file. So the idea here is to kind of understand what are you learning? How is it affecting targeted populations? How is it affecting our students? How can we use this information to improve all of our processes? Or, what did you learn? And so we really want to make sure that if we're paying this money to send folks to go, we want to make sure that it's actually going to improve our system. And I think that was it. Oh, so then, I went too fast. Go back. Our next report, we're going to talk about enrollment and staffing, and then anything else that came up tonight that we also might want to consider. So we will be bringing these reports and looking very in depth at different ideas and different things that we can really improve our system and also look at how we can cut costs.
Okay. Any requests to speak on the side of board members' comments or questions? Ms. Beal?
I appreciate that explanation. As we make these changes and how we look at our spending, it's nice for everybody to understand. I don't know if you're soliciting comments on a particular part of the process. Are you?
Sure. Yes.
The only thing I would say is, as a person who's a clinician, not everybody gets to go to the annual conference because otherwise the clinic will be empty. So maybe that's part of the consideration is that annual conferences are unfortunately annual. So not everybody can go every year. So I don't think we should be having a week where there are no counselors.
Right.
And I think it's also reasonable to say not just one, that half can go this year and half can go next year. And I love the part where you added that people are going to bring back what they learned at the conference, because that is what the other counselors will be able to get.
Yes.
And maybe there's other professional learning they can go to at a different time of the year if funds allow. So it's not about trying to keep people from learning. It's about making sure that our schools are not impacted when there's like a wholesale group of people going somewhere. So I know that you're considering that, but maybe one of the realistic things to say is we can't just be down to one counselor
Yeah.
for, for 5 days. It's just not going to work for the students. So.
Good.
Mr. Banning. Let me, you'll go and then, yeah, go ahead.
I know that there was questions about this, and one of the considerations was, are we talking about process or impact to the budget? And it's both. The answer is really both, because part of what we're learning is there's also behaviors that are just, this is how we've done things in Santa Barbara Unified, that we're encountering and trying to refine and get better at. So I know that the board desires to know, like, what are you gonna cut and when are we gonna cut it by? We really want to be thoughtful and do both at the same time. So I just want to kind of reiterate, because I know that was a bit of a concern. And we did add that slide on the budget sustainability that wasn't in your original packet in this form. So thank you for those questions, because they do help us see that through your lens. But I wanted to just reiterate that. Thank you.
Mr. Banning.
You started out by saying that conference and travel is frozen. Does that mean frozen from at what point? If things were planned and budgeted prior to X, are these new requests, or are we going back to just starting at the beginning of the year? How's that work?
I think we started at the beginning of the year and just said, no. And unless there's something like this that is, required, important, all those things.
Mr. Escobedo.
Thank you. I'm appreciative of this process. And has the committee said no to anyone yet?
Not yet, because those are the only things that we looked at were what I just showed you. Yes, not yet.
Okay. I am quite appreciative of these presentations. And one piece of feedback, because we're ultimately building towards budget season. And we're trying to build capacity and knowledge, and we want as much information as possible. And we're trying to get there in a very intentional and practical manner. I'm thinking forward maybe 5 or 6 months or 4 months. Someone is going to drop in and they're going to be like, oh, now they're doing a budget presentation just before they're going to make these decisions. It would be helpful if in the board memo, you document each presentation, the topic, and the date it was done, and maybe even a link to the presentation if you can, so that folks, if they drop in at the 11th hour, they can see, oh, there were all these other presentations talking about these other topics, that they're all related, right? It's all a piece of the puzzle of the larger picture. Because I can imagine that not everyone is going to be watching every single board meeting. And I think these are really, really important. And you're doing a really good job of, again, being intentional, creating these processes, including multiple stakeholders in the process. Because when I look at, it is slide 6, when you're talking about the feedback, right? It's not only about saying yes or no, it's saying, yes, but here are the considerations that and the problems that we need to solve for, and the other and here are some concerns, and not flat out saying no, but site leadership, here's what you have to take into consideration for these folks while they're gone. And the answer then might be, to Dr. Beal's point, half go this year, half go next year, or yes to some and no to others. And depending on what that argument is. But I think the process that you set forth, I don't know if this was happening previously, maybe it was, but this is extremely helpful, and I think brings up some really good conversations for site leadership, for us at the district office, for the board. And so I just wanted to say thank you.
Oh, great.
For your presentation. I just have a comment and a question. First of all, thank you for that. And as we're going through the theory of alignment, so this feels like a small test of change that has to happen. Because you think about all the things that we've even inherited in this district, much to the point you just said, we used to do it always that way, but we can't make these grand, big changes. We need to have that small test of change. And I think that's exactly where we're doing it. And we are aligning it with the work and the leadership principles that we're learning. And so I think it's important to connect those pieces for everyone in terms of this is a small test of the change of what we're trying to what we're hoping to see. So connecting also what we're then learning as a district so that everybody's get that. So when you drop in,
Yeah.
you can drop in, but you also know that there has been some history there, right? So that's changing hearts and minds. And that's when things start to change, when those two aligning and can do that. So I appreciate that and understanding that it is a small test of change because we are a district that has been in existence for a while now. And so we are used to doing things a certain way and certain expectations. So we will continue to do that, those small tests of change that become institutionalized. Whether we're here or not, it becomes institutionalized, how we're going to do things, how we're going to, create better communication, which we are constantly hearing. So that's in our processes as well. So I went to a summit when you're talking about going to somewhere and being able to take what you learn and put it into practice when you leave. That's something that's really critical to be able to do that. One of the things that they said that there's often a gap between who we think we are and how we show up, right? So how we think about that. So how are we showing up, whether that's in our practices, whether that's in our systems, all those things, how we're showing up. And our direct line of sight is student success. So as long as those things are connecting and we keep connecting and using that same language along the way. So that's a comment. And I want to thank you for continuing to do that because that's not easy to do. And I just have a question because we do have funding. There's district funding, there's site funding, and there's private funding.
Right.
So how does that impact our frozen language? Says, well, no, it's being funded by the committee. Can I go? So how are we dealing with those types of things?
Yeah, so if, couple of pretty much all of them were different funding than general fund. So we are definitely saying we're looking at all of it. Don't assume just because it's funded by a foundation or whatever, that it's, outside funding, that we still need to look at it because if we're getting outside funding, maybe we make a choice that that's not going to be used for conferences. It might be used for something else for our students. So, yes, we're making that statement that all of conference and travel will need to go through this process, no matter what the funding is.
That's good to know to keep reiterating that as well, because it could be assumed that, well,
Right.
it's not impacting the district's general fund, we should be able to go. But it's a process again that we're putting in place. And then how do we make sure that it's matching that up as well and it's aligning with how we're going to be making policy. So any additional comments or Mr.
I
Bennett?
just appreciate those comments so much because this is born out of budget and cuts and concerns, but it is a process that strengthens our process regardless of what the budget is. And that's the way we should be working. That's awesome.
Ms. Munoz?
Yeah, I just also want to reinforce what, others are saying, that it's helpful in terms of educating us as to how the process is going to be decided and such, and then how we're going to be learning and just adjusting along the way to the reality. Thank you.
As I hear you guys talk, I also am connecting back to, we have PTAs and foundations that need to know this. And so part of what we work on after this meeting is a board recap. And I'll be working with the director, Ismael Ulloa, on this so that we also get some communication out to all those other funders to come along the process with us and align to their contributions, whether it's in money, time, or effort to these, and understand why we might reject it. It's not just we're being mean, but we actually are trying to connect some of our outcomes in a way that aligns to student success. Thank you.
And that would also help with our inequity sometimes because some sites are able to raise a little bit money more than others and there's other things. So this will also help as we're, again, looking through a lens of equitable distribution. Any additional comments? Ooh, we are coming to a close of this meeting. Hallelujah. So anyway, so we'll go to our next, we didn't have anything returned. We had a discussion on that. So coming events, you can see those, board members. Some have been mentioned tonight. Wanna?
I just caught that, Mr. Vance, is it flyer?
You send them over
Mr.
here.
Vance, has scheduled, it didn't make it on this, so I apologize to the board, a racial climate oversight committee retreat on Sunday, September 15th at the Bowers Foundation, starting at 9 to noon. So that is a coming event that wasn't previously added to this agenda, but it is happening this Sunday. And we had announced that this was a retreat that was coming up. We just have finally finalized that date.
Okay, and that's open to the public. What's?
Is it open to the public, Mr. Vance?
We didn't announce.
We have not announced it to the public,
We
so.
just did now.
We just did now. But it is a retreat.
So I just
for
wanna be
that
clear.
Committee that they have asked for as part of, you've heard us talk about this before.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, just want to be clear with that. Okay, so, and then you, again, with that addition, we have everything that's there, which is coming forth. And then you have also future agenda items there listed here. Our governance calendar is there that guides us with that. And then our next meeting we will adjourn to is Saturday, September 4th. It's a special board meeting, a governance workshop on September 14th. What's the time on that, Dr.?
So that meeting is scheduled, you'll get some more details tomorrow morning, but it's scheduled from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at VADA. And we will be using the new classroom at VADA.
Okay, with that, we adjourn at 8:25.